Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another deep dive into the hidden truths of history. Today, we uncover a chapter from one of America's most iconic families, the Kennedys. But this isn't a tale of glamour, political triumph, or wealth. No, this is a story shrouded in pain, secrecy, and the devastating consequences of ambition. At the heart of this story is Rosemary Kennedy, the third child of Joseph and Rose Kennedy. Born on September 13, 1918, Rosemary was a beloved member of the family, or at least that's what the Kennedys wanted the world to believe. But behind closed doors, Rosemary's life was anything but idyllic. At the age of 22, her powerful father, Joseph P. Kennedy Sr., forced her to undergo a lobotomy. The official explanation: she was mentally disabled, prone to mood swings and behavioral issues that the family deemed unmanageable. But as we peel back the layers of this tragic event, new evidence suggests an even darker truth, a truth that may shock you. Rosemary's early life. Let's begin by understanding Rosemary as a child. From the outside, she seemed like a typical young girl. She was beautiful, charming, and, by many accounts, eager to please. However, it became clear early on that Rosemary struggled academically and socially. Her motor skills were delayed, and her teachers described her as slow. In today's world, these challenges might have been met with understanding, specialized education, and support. But in the 1920s and 30s, mental health and developmental disorders were stigmatized, particularly in elite families like the Kennedys, who were obsessed with projecting an image of perfection. As Joseph Kennedy climbed the social and political ladder, Rosemary's struggles became a source of embarrassment. The Kennedys were a family destined for greatness, or so Joseph believed, and Rosemary's differences didn't fit into his grand plan. The decision for lobotomy. By the time Rosemary reached her early 20s, her behavior had become more challenging. She experienced mood swings and occasional outbursts, and her growing sexuality was seen as a liability. In a family ruled by a domineering patriarch, this was unacceptable. Joseph Kennedy consulted with doctors, seeking a solution to Rosemary's behavior. What he chose was a radical and untested procedure, the lobotomy. At the time, this experimental surgery was being touted as a miracle cure for mental illness, though its success rate was abysmally low. In 1941, at the age of just 22, Rosemary underwent the procedure without her knowledge or consent. The details of what happened in that operating room are chilling. During the surgery, an instrument was inserted into her brain, and the surgeon asked her to recite simple phrases. When she could no longer speak, they stopped. The result was catastrophic. Rosemary was left severely incapacitated. Once a vibrant young woman, she could no longer walk, speak coherently, or care for herself. She was reduced to the mental capacity of a toddler, and her family quietly hid her away in an institution. The darker truth. Now, let's explore the question that lingers: why did Joseph Kennedy choose such a drastic and dangerous procedure for his daughter? Was it truly out of concern for her mental health, or was there another motive? Recent evidence suggests that Rosemary's problems may have been exaggerated, or even fabricated. Reports indicate that Rosemary may not have been severely mentally disabled at all. Instead, her struggles could have been the result of undiagnosed learning disabilities or even dyslexia, conditions that were poorly understood at the time. But there's more. Some historians believe that Rosemary's burgeoning independence and her interest in men terrified Joseph Kennedy. He feared that her actions could lead to scandal and tarnish the family's reputation. In a time when women's behavior was tightly controlled, and any hint of impropriety could ruin a family, Rosemary's natural development may have been seen as a threat. And so, Joseph Kennedy made a choice, not to protect his daughter, but to protect the Kennedy name. In his eyes, a lobotomy was a way to silence Rosemary forever, ensuring she would never bring shame to the family. The aftermath. The consequences of Joseph Kennedy's decision were devastating. Rosemary spent the rest of her life in institutions, unable to fully comprehend what had been done to her. For decades, her existence was hidden from the public, with the Kennedys claiming she was away at a special school. It wasn't until the 1960s, after Joseph Kennedy suffered a stroke, that Rosemary's siblings began visiting her and acknowledging her plight. Eunice Kennedy Shriver, in particular, became an advocate for people with intellectual disabilities, founding the Special Olympics in honor of her sister. But no amount of advocacy could undo the harm done to Rosemary. She passed away in 2005 at the age of 86, having spent most of her life confined and forgotten. The Kennedy family's silence. For decades, the Kennedys maintained an eerie silence about Rosemary. While the family was in the public eye, building political empires and championing social causes, they rarely, if ever, spoke about their institutionalized daughter. It wasn't just the lobotomy they were hiding, it was Rosemary herself. In an era when the Kennedys were crafting their Camelot image, admitting to having a disabled family member was seen as a sign of weakness. But what's truly heartbreaking is how this silence robbed Rosemary of her voice. She became a footnote in her own family's history, an unacknowledged victim of societal pressures and her father's unrelenting ambition. Even today, the Kennedy family's handling of Rosemary's story raises questions about accountability. Was their advocacy for the disabled later in life enough to atone for what was done to her, or did they simply use her plight to craft a narrative of redemption? Society's role in Rosemary's fate. It's essential to remember that the Kennedys didn't act in a vacuum. The society of the time played a significant role in Rosemary's tragic fate. The early 20th century was a time of deep stigma against mental health issues and intellectual disabilities. Terms like imbecile and feeble-minded were used freely, often to justify institutionalization or sterilization. Lobotomies themselves were a product of this era's ignorance. The procedure, developed in the 1930s by Portuguese neurologist Antonio Egas Moniz, was initially hailed as a breakthrough. Doctors believed they could cure mental illness by severing connections in the brain. But the reality was far more barbaric. Thousands of patients were left incapacitated, their personalities erased in the name of progress. Rosemary Kennedy was not just a victim of her family's choices, she was a victim of a medical system that prioritized control over compassion. Her story is a haunting reminder of the dangers of unchecked medical experimentation and societal prejudice. Lessons from Rosemary's story. So, what can we learn from Rosemary Kennedy's life? For one, her story highlights the importance of advocating for those who cannot advocate for themselves. It's a call to ensure that every individual, regardless of their abilities, is treated with dignity and respect. It also serves as a cautionary tale about the destructive power of ambition. Joseph Kennedy's relentless pursuit of power led him to make a decision that forever altered his daughter's life. In his eyes, Rosemary's differences were flaws to be corrected, rather than traits to be embraced. Finally, Rosemary's story underscores the importance of speaking out against injustice, even within our own families. Silence and secrecy only perpetuate harm, as we've seen in this tragic case. The legacy of Rosemary Kennedy. Despite the darkness surrounding her life, Rosemary's story is not without hope. Her siblings, particularly Eunice Kennedy Shriver, turned their guilt and grief into action. The founding of the Special Olympics in 1968 created a global movement that continues to empower millions of people with intellectual disabilities. Through the Special Olympics and other initiatives, Rosemary's legacy has become one of resilience and transformation. While she may have been silenced in life, her story now speaks volumes about the need for compassion, understanding, and systemic change. A final reflection. As we close this chapter, let's take a moment to honor Rosemary Kennedy, not as a victim, but as a symbol of the countless individuals who have been marginalized, silenced, and mistreated throughout history. Her life reminds us that behind every family's facade, there are stories of pain and perseverance. And behind every tragedy, there is an opportunity to learn, grow, and ensure that history does not repeat itself. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this story resonated with you, please consider sharing it with others. Together, we can continue to shed light on the untold stories that deserve to be heard. Until next time, take care, and remember, every life, no matter how hidden or silenced, is worth remembering.